He had done everything he could in the United States and outside of the Philippines. He had rallied the opposition. He had spoken against Marcos. He had testified before Congress, and there was nothing more he could do. So he felt that he really had to go home.
I told Ninoy, I really honestly feel, Ninoy, that when you alight from that plane, you will be shot. And there was a moment of silence, and then Ninoy looks at me and he says, even if I were placed in a box, I would still go home because the Filipinos are worth dying for.
I told him, Ninoy, you suffered for 7 years and 7 months in prison, and I think you've suffered enough for your country. Why should you suffer more?
I wrote Mr. Marcos and I told him that while I have vowed never to enter the political arena again, I shall dedicate the last drop of my blood to the restoration of freedom and the dismantlement of your martial law. Do not forget that your readiness to suffer will light the torch of freedom which can never be put out. And learn to say no. No to tyranny, no to corruption, no to all this degradation of human dignity. The moment you say no, you're beginning to protest. The moment you say no to tyranny, you're beginning the struggle, the long, lonely road to freedom.
The writer Nick Joaquin organized Aquino's family history around 3 generations of people who defied authority. Ninoy's grandfather, Severiano Aquino, fought the colonial power Spain and its successor, the United States of America. Severiano was a rebel, a national hero, and for a time, a political prisoner. In Aquino's hometown in Tarlac province, it was grandfather Severiano Aquino who erected a statue to the Philippine national hero Jose Rizal, who was executed by the Spanish for his opposition to their tyranny. Rizal looks out on a town square that is named for Severiano's most acclaimed son, Ninoy's father, Don Benigno Aquino Sr., an ardent nationalist. During America's colonial rule of the Philippines, when other politicians clung to the idea of a second-class affiliation with the United States, Benigno Sr. campaigned vigorously for total independence. When Japan completed its invasion of the Philippines in 1942, Benigno Sr., under pressure to soften the blow of invasion, was taken in by Japan's promise of an Asia for Asians. As the fortunes of Japan's military suffered, so did Benigno Aquino's reputation. He was imprisoned by the victorious Americans, then paroled to await trial on charges of collaborating with the enemy. In the company of his namesake, Benigno Jr., he suffered a heart attack. Ninoy told Nick Joaquin, when the Americans came back, Papa was all of a sudden a collaborator. Those who I thought were my friends began to shun me. When he died, I thought my world had ended. I began to distinguish between night and day, sorrow and laughter. Determined to recoup the family's name, Aquino started to work on the Manila Times at 15 as a copy boy. He ate, slept, and showered at the newspaper, and at odd hours, he became a copywriter.
I think he started as a messenger boy, and they asked for volunteers of reporters to go to Korea and nobody volunteered, so he volunteered. He was 17 years old.
He took his own photographs and became known in the press corps as Aquino, the milk boy. He said Korea aged him 10 or 20 years. It gave me the fatalism that's with me to this day. Do your job and hope tomorrow will be another day. And if tomorrow doesn't come, that's it.
Returning to the Philippines, Ninoy Aquino struck out into the mountains to interview the most renowned peasant rebel of the island of Luzon, Luis Taruk. Through a series of meetings, Aquino became the conduit for Taruk's surrender, a national event that made Aquino a national figure. He described Taruk as one of the few men who impressed him in youth. He never talked to me of communism. He talked of the poor in this country. He opened my eyes to the inequities in my own hometown. I thought to myself, this is the first Christian I have met.
The same year, aged 21, he courted and married Corazon Cojuangco, a deeply religious, American-educated offspring of the largest landowners in Tarlac province. The president, Ramon Magsaysay, gave Aquino a medal and enlisted him as an advisor, aide, and confidant.
At President Magsaysay's urging, Aquino returned with Corazon to his family's house in Concepcion and ran for mayor. Bewildered by the ferocity of the opposition campaigns, Ninoy Aquino, for once in his life, thought of quitting.
He was curled up in bed and said, I don't want to do this anymore. I just don't want to do this anymore. And my mom I think my mom had a terrific influence on him. She says, no, you got to get up here and campaign.
My mother, in trying to convince him to continue the fight, I think first applied her motherly authority. When that didn't work, she applied feminine tears. When that didn't work, she applied pride that even in cockfighting, you don't run away, you go down fighting.
Ninoy found his voice.
Knew exactly the pulse of the audience, when to crack a joke, when to touch their heart, when you draw an applause, because people just go to hear him.
He can talk for not hours, for days, if given the chance.
He called himself a radical rich guy, first as a mayor, then vice governor and governor of his province. He promoted land reform, equal access to public education, and social welfare. Charles Avila was then a young democratic socialist who had left the priesthood for a life of activism, inspired by the social vision of Pope John XXIII.
When I first met him, he was rich, he was powerful, but he was a good man who was going to do and wanted to do good things for the people.
It's a peaceful revolution, I think. That is what he was looking for.